Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're going to be doing a radio replacement on this early 2000s Ford F350. Now in this install we're going to be replacing the existing double din, which has failed. The screen has died, really rendering it useless, and we're going to be upgrading it with a new Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, double din touchscreen radio. Let's get started. So to get started, what we need to do is lower our steering wheel column. We're also going to drop down our give shifter, just like so. It's going to beep for a minute, it's okay. And then using a panel tool, we're going to actually unclip the bezel from up and around the radio. Okay. Disconnect all your harnesses here. Alright, with that out of the way, that basically has now allowed us all this extra space. Now to work on the radio itself, a lot of harnesses you got to disconnect in that dash bezel. Not a great design, but it is what it is. Now what we need to do next is up and around the radio, there's going to be 4 7mm bolts. Let's go ahead and remove those. Disconnect your harnesses here. Again, whether they're factory or aftermarket. Alrighty, so with everything disconnected here, whether, like I said, you have the factory or aftermarket radio, it's just going to be the same. You're going to be left with the main stereo harness. You have your antenna plug here. At this point in time, with the radio removed, let's head on over to the truck and begin showing you the parts we need to get an aftermarket radio installed in this location. Alright, so the parts that we're going to need for our install, first and foremost, is the radio that we've chosen to go with. This is just the second-hand refurbished Sony double din radio. This is the XAV-AX100. This does Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is super nice, but it is a single din and a double din setup, so it'll actually give us a little bit extra space in the dash, which is great. Now to accommodate that in the dash, we have our dash kit. Now this is the Metra 95-5812 double din kit. Now obviously this is secondhand as well. We're just using it from our previous radio. However, we'll link this down in the description along with all the other parts we're using today in the event you want to pick some up yourself. If you want the single din version, we'll also link that in the description. And then finally, to accommodate the wiring in the dash, we have the Metra 70-5520. If you have the factory amplified version of your truck, it would be the Metra 70-5521. So this is the 5520 version. Basic harness, you don't need a smart harness for this early of a truck, which is super nice, but we do have steering wheel volume controls. And again, we're just reusing this steering wheel module unit. This is the iData-Link Maestro steering wheel control universal module. There's one also by pack, there's one by axis. It just really depends on the one that you want. We have steering wheel controls. We want to retain them on the new radio, so what we'll need to do is hook this into our harness and into the car to retain those buttons on the steering wheel to work with our new Sony double din. Alright, so at this point what we need to do is grab the harness that came with the Sony radio and our aftermarket adapter harness. What we're going to do is strip both ends, and we're actually just simply going to match, for the most part, color for color. This is going to allow us to plug directly into the factory plug back behind the factory radio, and this end will go right to our Sony. Okay, so we went ahead and soldered all our connections up, color for color. For the ones that were different, our power antenna, which is our solid blue, whether you have an amplified circuit or an actual powered antenna, we just tied it into our red and just soldered it in together. Also a special connection, our steering wheel control module, this little harness plugs into it, has a red and a black. It's power and a ground. And you'll probably see that also with the pack harness or the axis harness for your steering wheel controls. Regardless, you need to tie that in as well because it does need accessory power. So you can see that we've also tied that in there. and solder that in. And then same thing with the ground. In the ground you have a little bit better view here. You just tie that all in together. With our Sony, with the parking brake, we can just go ahead and ground it. So we did that here. You don't need any sort of bypass with this model, which is fortunate. And then I also left a into that red that I tied in, and just another accessory hang off. That's about it for our connections here. This is our backup camera trigger wire, which we'll hook up and show you in a different video. And this is our amplifier turn on wire. We don't have an amplifier, but we'll leave it out. We'll throw a butt connector on just in case we add something like that down the road. So at this point, what we're going to do is take our heat shrink, move it up and over those connections, then we'll shrink it down with the heat gun. Alright, so with those tubes all shrunken down, let's go ahead and wrap our harness in some Testa tape just to protect the wiring up in the dash and also gives it a professional look. Alright, so we finished up our wiring harness here. This little dongle, as you saw, just hangs off and connects into our Maestro module. Now the only wire outside of our power and ground that we need to connect into the car for our Maestro wire, the light blue with the red stripe, according to Maestro. So of all those wires, we just needed power and ground, which you saw as hookup, and then the other one is blue with a red stripe, and all the other ones we just capped off, we just taped in there. We won't need in our install here today. And there is no connection in our harness adapter that this would go into, so we left this kind of long because we'll need to tap into wire in the main wiring harness in the truck once we get ready to get everything installed. So we'll show you where that needs to connect in the truck. Other than that, we kept an accessory out for backup camera power, an amp turn on just in case we need it, and our backup camera trigger wire. So at this point, our wiring's done. This end plugs into the steering wheel controlled WR input on the back of the radio according to our instructions. Now, last thing here before we talk about the radio, this module requires you to go to a computer and flash it. You can't program it here on the bench. So what we did is we decided to go to Maestro's website and we flashed our module. So essentially we plugged this guy on into the computer with a mini USB cable, and essentially went to the website. We put in the Ford information. We said this is the radio that we're using. It really walks you through step by step. It talks about the wiring configuration here. Then we go to the next page and it shows, okay, of all the wires that this module has that we saw before here, what wires do you need for your application? Because this is a universal module, and according to the schematics we only need 3 wires, one of which is what actually pulls the signal from the steering wheel, and that's that light blue /red wire on our Maestro that we'll need to connect into pin 18 of our radio's harness in the car. Everything else is not used or not connected except your red and black wire, which is your accessory, and your ground. Now it shows you further down here an image of the harness where pin 18 is located, and it shows it's right there. So what we're going to do is we'll jump into the car once we're ready to get the radio installed to show you how to connect our wire to pin 18. Lastly here, an important note. When we flashed it, it actually had a note: if your up and next buttons are not functioning correctly. In our experience, that was the case. When we hit the up button or the mode button, it used it as a volume up instead of the volume up itself. It was just confused. It didn't work properly. So if that be the case in your circumstance, if the up and or next buttons are not functioning properly, try reprogramming the module for an F-150 of the same year. So what we did is we went back to the computer, reflashed this as if we're doing an F-150, not an F-350, with all the other information exactly the same, and it works just fine. Okay, so finally here we got the kit on the radio. Super simple. We're good to go. At this point of time, let's head back to the truck and begin installing our radio. Alright, so we're back here in the dash. Now at this point in time, we're ready to get the radio all mounted again in the factory location. Let's grab our wiring harness adapter. At this point, what we can do is now plug it into your harness. This end will plug into our new radio. This end plugs into the steering wheel control input, the SWR on the back of our Sony. Now if you have a Bluetooth mic, go ahead and run that. We mounted ours right above the rearview mirror, ran it across, down, and through the dash. So we'll plug that one on in as well. And at this point, we're ready to connect our radio. Now for our one wire that we had to manually wire in here of our harness. Remember, it's our blue with a red stripe. Well, on the back of it, there's a blue with a red stripe as well on the factory side. Again, it's pin number 18, this guy there. And we just stripped the wire back and tapped into that. You can use a T-tap, you can solder in. We just soldered in and covered it in heat shrink, and that's all connected. But we need to connect this wire into that guy, which we have done, and that's the only connection outside of our wiring harness for steering wheel controls that we have to make. Alright, now before we button everything up, we want to make sure everything's working. So let's go ahead and do a test. Okay, it's booting up there. Yep, they're working. Let's try our next button. Yep, that's working good.
May have more than you think.
Let's try our mode button, which is our source. Go through all our sources here. Great. Perfect. Steering wheel controls are working. Remember, we reflashed our module as an F150, not a 350, just to ensure, as the instructions said, everything's working correctly. You'd only want to do that in the event your next up button isn't working properly, which ours wasn't in the case, so we followed the instructions and that resolved the issue. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and get the rest of the dash all back together. Alrighty, dash is all back together here. As that boots up, we did do a USB dual mod. Top one's for CarPlay for the radio and Android Auto. The bottom one is just strictly for charge. Well, that's about it for this install. Now, if you want to see the backup camera that we did on this truck, we'll link that down in the description here for you, as well as place a card up above where we walk you through step by step on how to install a license plate camera to this aftermarket radio. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time, and we will see you in the next video.